I've been getting some questions about my process of transcribing kind of chords and chord soloing, comping and everything that involves more than a single line. And I thought I'd make this short video about kind of trying to give you a few tips about how I go about transcribing this kind of shit and how you might kind of improve in doing that. So I think the first important thing that I want to say is that when you transcribe things, it's not only about learning those things you want to transcribe, right? It's not only about learning what the musician is doing, it's also about training your ears to listen to things. So even if you're not getting what you want to transcribe 100% right, you're still learning from it, you're still improving your ears. So that should be more the goal than even getting the chord 100% right. It should be like, you're forcing your ears to listen to something, which is already a positive thing to do. So, right, so having said that, of course, all of us, we want to get the chords right, and we want to kind of be able to emulate exactly what those players we love do, or the way they play those chords. And so I thought I'll give a few tips using the first 4 bars that I played in the beginning. And this is taken out of Peter Bernstein's solo I transcribed quite a while back. He's playing on a D minor blues, his own piece called Bones, I think. It's a D minor blues, a live YouTube video where he plays an amazing solo and an amazing chord solo. And let's take a look at some of the stuff he plays there. So again, we're in D minor, and it's a blues, so we're playing the first 4 bars. It's basically a D minor for 4 bars. You'll see that it does some harmonical kind of manipulation of that, and then the 5th bar is gonna get to a G minor. And I'm saying that not because I'm not gonna teach you exactly the phrase that he plays, but I think that understanding kind of harmonically what happens in the song while you're transcribing is kind of really helpful to transcribing. And I'll show you what I mean. Let's just start with the first chord. So the beat starts with that chord. It's just a B half diminished or a D minor 6. And kind of the first thing I do when I go about transcribing chord solos is just to figure out what the top note is. And that's something that is almost like transcribing a single line, right? Because when you play a chord, the thing that sticks out the most is the top voice of the chord, right? And that we should all be able to kind of listen to a chord and try and find out what's the top note. So in this case, we have the top note is D. And I mean, we could go ahead and kind of take a look maybe at all of the 4 bars. So right, so I kind of just played the same 4 bars that I played in the beginning, but just the top voice. So that's like the first thing you want to figure out when you're transcribing chords. And then you go about kind of constructing the chords below those notes, right? So you have something to start out with. And I think the next thing I listen to after I figure out the top voice is kind of the bottom voice, right? The bass of the chord, right? Not what the bass player is playing, what the guitar player is playing as the lowest voice. And the kind of, I think movement in the bass kind of sticks out, at least to my ear. I think to all of us, at the moment the bass kind of makes a radical movement, even like an augmented 4 or something, or even just a half step that kind of sticks out to us. And that's something that's really maybe a bit easier to hear than all the kind of inner movements of the movements of the inner voices. So let's just start out with the first 2 chords. We have this chord, it kind of repeats it 3 times, sort of, doesn't really pick it that obviously. And the next chord is here, right? So kind of the thing that sticks out to me the most after I kind of realized that D stays in the top as the top note, but the thing that sticks out to me the most is this bass movement, right? The kind of, I can really hear that happening when I listen to those two chords. So let's say we don't know the chords yet, we haven't transcribed them yet, we have already this top voice and this bass movement, right? And if you think about it, we in guitar, on the guitar we play mostly like four notes chords, or maybe 5 notes sometimes. So, but basically we already have 2 notes of each chord, so that's like almost 50% of the chords. And I think the next step is to fill out the gaps. And the filling up the gaps is really the hard part. Between, like to fill out the gap between the bass and the top voice of the chord. And I think I kind of use a combination of both my hearing, like my ears, whatever kind of notes I hear at the moment, or sometimes you think you hear something, sometimes maybe you hear something from the piano player, but you kind of try and figure out what the guy is playing with your ears. You also kind of want to use your theoretical knowledge, kind of thinking about the harmony of the song, thinking about the notes you already know, and then thinking about how you might fill in the gaps from a harmony point of view. And I'll demonstrate this in a sec. And the last thing is kind of knowing the chords that the musician you're transcribing uses, right? So each guitar player, in our case, has kind of chords that he likes using, that he uses quite often. And the more you get to know each musician, like if you transcribe a lot Wes, you know which chords Wes uses. And if you transcribe a lot Peter Bernstein, you kind of realize that he has a vocabulary of chords that he kind of uses over and over. And if you slowly get to learn them, then it would be easier for you to figure out kind of which chords he uses. So let's kind of keep taking a look at those 2 chords, right? So far we have the bass and the top note, bass going down half a step. Now with the first chord, we have a B and a D, right? And we said we're in a D minor scale. So kind of the first thing that comes to mind, at least in my mind, is just a D minor 6, right? We have a D, a B on top, so that's the 6, and now we just want to fill it up with D minor 6 notes. So basically the notes I'm missing are F, the minor 3rd, and A, which is the 5th. So there you go, I just filled it up with like my theoretical knowledge and kind of what I know a guitar player might use to kind of play a D on top in D minor key, and figure out that chord. So of course then you have to kind of play that chord against the recording and check out, make sure it sounds right, make sure that's really what he uses, because of course sometimes there are some other options, there are some more interesting options, or like alternative harmony that a musician might use. But anyway, in this case, kind of, okay, we figured out the chord, we listen to it, we think it sounds good, we can just stick with that chord. Now let's move on. The next chord is, of course I already transcribed it, but I think even while transcribing it, the thing that stuck out most to me was the inner movement of the voices. And I don't know if you guys hear this, I had it when I transcribed it, and I think it's a matter of listening a lot, listening over and over to the same kind of 2 chords, or maybe passage of chords. What I hear here in the middle is this A, the first chord, that becomes an A flat in the second chord. Right? So basically we have so far B, A, and D, that becomes B flat, A flat, and D. Right? But of course course, this is not the chord Pete plays. So again, you figured out this chord, you can kind of play it against the recording and kind of check it out. Does it sound right? Does it make sense? Does it sound the same as what Pete plays? And I think once you do that, you kind of figure out there's something missing. And of course, what's missing is this C note, right? We have a major second on top, so we have a D, C, and then comes this A flat and B flat. Right? And again, there's no shortcuts in doing that. You just have to, you listen to the top voice, you listen to the bass, you listen to the inner voices, you cross that with your theoretical knowledge, and then you still have to kind of check all that out with the original recording. Kind of check out, does it really fit? Does it really sound the same? So let's say we figured out the chord, right? We have a B flat kind of 7, B flat 7 with a 9. Let's keep going. So after that chord, Pete plays the F as a single line, and then he plays this chord up here. And again, so we figured out the top note already, right? That's the first thing we did. We have a G on top. And now we can we can figure out the bottom of the chord as well, which is a B flat in this case. So we have a G and B flat, so that doesn't leave us a lot of option. But again, what I would do is kind of think harmonically. So I would think, okay, this is a blues in D minor. We already had the D minor. Then in the beginning of the second bar, we had the B flat 7, right? So I know that the G minor is still far away, right? We're still not going to the G minor. So harmonically, what most musicians would do here, would play a B flat, an A, then go back to D minor. Now, of course, this is something you have to know. This is something you have to come across before. But more often than not, these are things that we can figure out also listening to the bass, listening to the piano play, listening to what kind of chords they're playing. So kind of figuring out the harmonic bass kind of really helps out. But again, so we said we want to play an A7. Let's go back to this tune. We want to play an A7 after the B flat 7. That would bring us back to D minor. So we have an A7 and we had a G on top, right? So we can just play an A7 with a G on top, right? So we have a G, C sharp, and then A. Or even a more complicated chord, more compound kind of A7. But if you kind of check that out against the recording, right? Doesn't sound the same, doesn't check out. So we have to keep trying. And I think the next thing I would check out after thinking about A7 is kind of a sub 5, right? Because we know that sub 5 is a very essential part of like playing jazz. Any jazz soloist kind of uses sub 5, and we know Pete uses a lot of sub 5s. So kind of that's the next thing I check out. And then this is kind of like the first thing you would try, right? And it's an E flat triad. So you have an E flat triad, you kind of have an A in the bass. Pete doesn't play that, but the bass player will be playing that. So that kind of, we checked that out against the recording and it sounds right. So we have the next chord. Right? And then after the E flat, of course, we go back to D minor. And let's take a look at the next phrase. So basically, if we already transcribed the first two chords, we can kind of, maybe we should be able to recognize them by now. We should kind of be able to listen to those two chords and say, okay, that sounds familiar. That's exactly what he played 2 bars ago, right? And if not, we can do the same process. We can listen to the top note, we can listen to the bass and kind of figure them out again in the same manner. And of course, then we keep going and we reach the next chord. And here again, we have the top note, right? Still a D. and the bass was B flat in the last chord. Now it goes down to A. So, sorry, just the A and D, right? Without telling you what the chord yet is. And kind of we use our kind of common sense, and we know a blues is gonna get to the G minor in the 5th bar. And the easiest way to get to a G minor, or maybe the most common way to get to a G minor, is just a 2-5, right? So we have 2-5 to a G minor, it's just an A minor, D7, and a G minor. So for me, once I hear this A in the bass and a D on top, kind of an A minor is really the first thing I look at in this context, right? And more often than not, you'll see that the first thing you look at, if you thought about it, if you really gone through all the stages, if you got the bass right, if you got the top note right, if you got the harmony right, then more often than not, the first chord you think about is gonna be the right chord. So we got this A minor, then we have this single line, and then the last kind of chord, 2 chords to finish this phrase are these 2 chords. And let's take a look at just the top note. We have an E flat going to D. And remember, we know this D is going to be a G minor. So I just go ahead and harmonize this D with a G minor, like the most common G minor I know. And of course, if you listen to the bass, it's going to check out as well, because the G is going to be on top. So we have a D, we have a G. The G is going to be at the bottom, sorry. We have a D on top and a G in the bottom. I just harmonize this as a G minor. And then common sense just tells us that the E flat could be just harmonized with half step up. And of course, we can also just listen to the bass, find out that there's an A flat in the bottom, then kind of harmonize this with a chromatic approach. So let me just summarize quickly the kind of steps that I would suggest to you. So first thing you have to do is listen to the top note, to the highest note, and kind of figure out what the melody is that the player is playing. The next step would be to check out the lowest voice, the bass of the chord, and try to figure out what's the movement the bass is doing. And after that, I would kind of cross those two to fill out the gaps between those two. I would kind of cross that with some inner movement, some movement of the inner voices, and some of your theoretical knowledge about harmony, about what's going on in the piece, what's going on in the tune that you're transcribing, and then kind of what could that mean for the chords that we're looking at. So those are the kind of the stages, and the thing that kind of really helps out is knowing the chords that each player uses, and knowing kind of the basic harmonic options on the guitar, right? So the basic ways of harmonizing each note on each chord on the guitar. And there's some really standard things that if we kind of know, it really helps us figure out the chords. And I think I won't do this in this video, but I'll have another video coming out with some really basic explanations about kind of basic ways that people kind of have used in the past to harmonize chords, to harmonize notes on the guitar, kind of in a jazz context. So yeah, I think that's it for today. If you have any questions about this, I know this is very confusing and maybe not very helpful, but this is how I go about transcribing it. If you have any questions, don't hesitate to ask, and I'll link to the transcription of this kind of this solo below as well, of the 4 bars that I just played. And as always, likes and subscriptions are appreciated, and we'll see you next time.